Hey there, everybody, and Happy New Year. Welcome to episode 9 of Kingdom Culture, where we talk about real life struggles, the pursuit of God in our process, overcoming our past, and becoming the sons and daughters God created us to be. I'm your host, Kara, and today's episode will probably be the shortest one that I will ever publish. And it's just a simple and straightforward message that, once again, comes from a current real life experience. Let me give you a little bit of background. As the end of 2021 approached, the Lord led me to really examine and evaluate every area of my life, the strong parts, the weak parts, and the parts that I still dream about coming to pass. I gave each category a page in my journal, and over the course of a few weeks, as I thought about the different areas of my life, I just wrote down what came to mind. Basically, I was just following the principle in Habakkuk of writing down the vision and making it plain. I do it this way because I'm not a big fan of resolutions or vision boards. Resolutions to me are just sort of empty goals a lot of times without a way to get there and without a strategy to see it through. And vision boards just don't really have that personal touch to me. I don't really want to look at other people or what other people have accomplished or built or done or have these predetermined images on a board. I want to have the freedom to explore what I want those things to look like for myself and allow my mind to create those images for me in my life without limitation. So I really enjoy vision casting instead, because vision casting is a lot different because it's very personal and it allows me to create a vision for those goals and allow myself to create bite-sized pieces and steps and practical ways to get there consistently, small steps over time. So that's why I do it that way. That's why I like to do the categories in that way. So I don't really look at my year as look at the goals that I want to accomplish for this year. I just look at this year as a season of my life and a collection of months that build into the overall vision of what I want to create for my life and what I want my life to look like over time. So just like I said, a season is a season, and Ecclesiastes talks about there's a time and a season for everything under the sun. And so if there's a plan in place for every season, that means every year, every month, every week, every day, every hour, minute, and second are all important because they're all a part of God's plan. So I just feel like if there is a plan, that means that there's an intended way to spend that time. So the Bible says that God gives us the desires of our heart, but I think really what ends up happening is that as we walk and grow with God, that He instills His desires in our hearts because He intends to fulfill them. So, side note, if He's asking you in this season to surrender your desires to Him, it's probably because He's trying to remind you that your desires are actually His desires and that they're way safer and better off in His hands than they are in yours. So, anyway, there is an intended way to spend the time that we are given by God. And so, because it's according to His plan and His purpose for how we live our lives, it just makes sense. Like, why wouldn't we just go to God and ask Him what we should be doing instead of trying to figure it out on our own? And I say all that to say this. After completing this journal exercise over the course of a few weeks, I started to recognize that many of the areas of my life were really, like God's intention was showing through on things from past years, but it was also highlighting different areas of my life that He wanted me to either press further into or just completely explore in a different way. And I realized too that actually, let me just back up for a second. In 2021, there was a lot of the year that I kept hearing God tell me to live my life. And at first it made sense because I was thinking, okay, I'm coming out of certain situations. I'm coming into a season of healing and identity and growing and changing and, really trying to figure out like what I want my life to look like. I had just moved back to Colorado and I hadn't really established myself yet. I was relying on a lot of other things to kind of like give me direction and purpose. And I hadn't really taken the time to like sit with myself and figure out what I wanted my life to look like. So that's kind of what I thought that was coming from, was like a, hey girl, like live your life kind of thing. But as time went on and he brought me through many painful situations and seasons and circumstances in my life and taught me a lot of really valuable lessons that were super hard, I realized that it wasn't actually encouragement. I realized that it was actually him giving me a command: live your life. And over time, I kind of really struggled to understand what that meant. And instead of asking what that meant to him, I just took it on my own understanding and ran with it and tried to live my life based on my own understanding of what that was. And it caused me to struggle because I kept thinking I was living my life, but then I kept hearing him tell me live my life. And so I tried to do more of what I was already doing in an effort to be obedient to him. But instead of feeling fulfilled, I started feeling burned out and exhausted and frustrated and tired and overwhelmed. And he still pressed me, though: live your life. And it kind of made me feel frustrated and annoyed. Am I not? I'm doing all these things. I'm trying to live my life based on what I think I should be doing. But I kept hearing the same thing. And I was, just doing more of what I was already doing. And I was already doing what I was doing before because I was doing that for a long time. And I had been doing that for a long time because I thought that was what I was supposed to be doing. And so it was in the middle of this whole exercise in the journal that I started to understand that maybe I just was not asking the right question. And I asked this question just before a really, couple really important categories were finished, kind of ending this exercise. And one night I was sitting with my best friend and I had mentioned to her how I was just feeling really frustrated and tired and overwhelmed, and that, how I just felt like God kept telling me to live my life and I just kept kind of feeling like I was spinning my wheels. And so I said to her, maybe I should just ask him what it means to him, because what I'm doing just is not really working. Maybe I'm just asking the wrong question. Maybe I'm not asking the right question. Maybe I just need to ask him what that looks like. And it was in that moment that I realized that I never really had asked him what that looked like, what his intention was, what that meant from his heart to my heart of what that meant for me. So once I sat down and said, okay, Lord, you're giving me a command. There's a reason you're doing this. There's a reason attached to it. What does it look like to you for me to live my life? And of course, I'd asked him about, other things in my life, his plans, his will, what I'm supposed to be doing, what I'm not supposed to be doing. But specific to that command of living my life, I never really dove into that deep with him. I just, like I said, I kind of took that, live your life. And then I was like, okay, I know what that means. And I just took it and ran with it without actually saying what does that mean? So once I did that, he really opened the doors to understanding and insight and knowledge and began to show me what that actually meant. And it's really begun to open doors that are leading me into his plan and purposes for my life. And some of these things I just have already stepped into, like this podcast, but other things I either had dismissed before, forgotten about, or didn't even realize that it was a thing because I just didn't know about them yet. And so I still don't have all the details, of course, but I have enough information to step out in faith and to start moving forward and to know that he's calling me to live the life that he created me to live, which is really exciting. And with this fresh insight, now I have a better understanding of what that actually looks like. So I leave you with this. In 2022, live your life. Explore, discover, create, dream, envision. But do it with the Lord. I really believe the Lord is calling many of his people into new spaces, into new directions for their lives in this season. And I believe he's rearranging the lives of his children so that they understand their assignment, their purpose, their calling, and their position. I believe he's asking to be invited into those decisions in our lives and into the goals, into the dreams, into the visions, because he already has a wonderful plan for you. So before you go off living your life the way you think you should live it, or before you go off doing whatever you think feels right or feels good, make sure you go and ask God what his vision for you is for this season and for your life. Because remember, not everything that feels good or seems good or even works for a little while is necessarily God's will for you. And you just, it's better to understand his plan and avoid walking into situations that you just aren't supposed to deal with. And having his plan, he's just going to have things be so much better for you than you could ever put together for yourself. So it just makes sense to go to him and ask. And we have to spend time with him in order to understand what he wants for us. So remember, many of our desires are his desires that he's given to us. And he will fulfill those desires in his way, in his time, and the way that he intended to do that. Even if it's crazy and doesn't make sense and sometimes can be really hard and confusing and painful, still stick it out. Let him fulfill them the way that he wants to. If you have a desire that God has given to you, let him fulfill it. We don't have to go and make things happen. We don't have to go and manufacture things. We don't have to go and figure things out on our own. We can instead just surrender our will to his will, trust that his plans are good, and wait on his timing for him to fulfill those things in our lives that we desire for him to fulfill, because he gave them to us as his desires for us, with plans to fulfill them. So go and live your life. Until next time, be blessed.